Good evening. Tonight, we are talking about a night the Kremlin would very much like its people to forget. Not a night that began with a declaration of war. Not a night marked by a televised address from Vladimir Putin. And not a night that started on the front lines. It was a night that began in the skies over Moscow, a sky the Russian government has spent years assuring its citizens was beyond reach. A sky protected, they claimed, by some of the most advanced and expensive air defense systems on Earth. A protective dome presented as an absolute guarantee of safety for the capital. But on the night of December 10th, that sky changed color. Not figuratively, literally. For hours, Moscow was lit by explosions, failed intercepts, and burning debris fallout from one of the largest drone assaults ever directed at a modern capital city. Air raid sirens echoed through districts that had not heard them in decades. Windows rattled. Phones flashed emergency alerts. And what began to crack was not concrete or steel. It was something far more fragile. The belief that war would never reach Moscow. The promise of war somewhere else collapses. For nearly 3 years, the Kremlin maintained an unspoken deal with Russian society. You can endure sanctions. You can accept shortages. You can tolerate losses so long as they happen far away. The war was framed as a special military operation, controlled and contained, unfolding somewhere beyond the horizon. Moscow, according to the official narrative, was different, sacred, untouchable. That narrative collapsed in a single night. According to Russia's own Ministry of Defense, speaking reluctantly, nearly 300 Ukrainian drones entered Russian airspace between late evening and early morning when civilians were asleep and unprepared. Dozens of those drones were tracked directly toward Moscow and its surrounding region, the political and economic heart of the country, home to more than 20 million people. This was not symbolic. This was not harassment. It was a systemic stress test of Russia's defenses, and Moscow failed it. When airports stop, the state is exposed. To understand the true shock of that night, do not begin with radar screens or missile batteries. Begin with the airports. Airports are where state power meets daily life, where claims of control are either validated or publicly disproven. On December 10th, all three of Moscow's major airports were effectively paralyzed: Sheremetyevo, Domodedovo, and Vnukovo. These are not regional facilities. They are Russia's gateways to the world. As sirens sounded, flight boards turned red. Departures vanished. Arrivals were diverted. Aircraft already taxiing were ordered to stop. Passengers were moved away from windows and told to wait. By morning, nearly 400 flights had been canceled, delayed, or rerouted. Hundreds of planes were grounded. Thousands of passengers stranded, luggage piled up like evidence of a system in failure. And it wasn't only civilians. In a quiet but deeply embarrassing diplomatic incident, the aircraft carrying Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan was unable to land in Moscow. Russia could not guarantee the safety of its own airspace. A nuclear-armed power, unable to receive an allied head of government in its own capital. This was not just a technical failure. It was a public admission of vulnerability. When official narratives break down, eyewitness accounts from inside the terminals that night painted a picture state television could not sanitize. Passengers reported hearing explosions reverberate through aircraft fuselages. Security personnel appeared confused, issuing conflicting instructions. Official reassurances clashed with what people could see in real time. And this matters. Authoritarian systems survive not only on force, but on narrative coherence. When a screen above you reads "flight canceled due to drone threat," while television insists everything has been repelled, people believe the screen. What 300 drones really signify? The central question after that night was simple. How did this happen? Moscow is encircled by layered air defense systems, short-range, medium-range, and long-range platforms designed to intercept advanced threats. On paper, the shield looks formidable. In reality, it was built for a different era, designed to counter a small number of fast, expensive targets. Ukraine chose a different strategy: saturation. Hundreds of cheap, Slow, low-flying drones approached from multiple directions and altitudes, overwhelming systems never designed to process such volume. This was not a failure of personnel. It was a limitation of physics. Each intercept costs hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. Each drone costs a fraction of that. This was not only a military operation, it was economic warfare. The psychological strike. The greatest damage inflicted that night was not physical, it was psychological. Vladimir Putin's authority rests on a tacit bargain: surrender political freedom in exchange for stability and security. That bargain shattered in the skies over Moscow. For the first time in generations, ordinary Muscovites experienced what Ukrainians have endured for years: sirens, disrupted travel, explosions overhead, and the realization that the state cannot guarantee safety. The war was no longer somewhere else. It was above your apartment, above your commute, above your child's bedroom. The myth is gone. The myth of Moscow's invulnerability did not erode slowly. It collapsed in a single night. Airports shut down, Allied leaders turned away. A capital city frozen by cheap machines, exposing expensive lies. Putin's palaces may be protected, his tunnels may run deep. But the people above ground now know something they cannot unlearn. The war is no longer at the border. The war is inside the home. And no one, not even in Moscow, is untouchable. What comes after the shattered night? And here is where this story stops being about drones or air defense systems or even Moscow itself. Because once the illusion of absolute control is broken, it does not quietly repair itself. It metastasizes. Inside the Kremlin, December 10th was not interpreted as a one-off incident. It was read as a warning shot, not at a building, but at the architecture of power. Russia's leadership understands something its propaganda cannot admit. Air defense failures are survivable. Loss of public confidence is not. That night introduced a new variable into Russian life: unpredictability. Before, the state could tell its citizens, the war is far away, the capital is safe, your daily routines will remain untouched. After December 10th, that claim rings hollow. People now plan their commutes with air alerts in mind. Travelers wonder whether flights will take off. Parents glance upward when sirens sound, not outward toward distant front lines. This is how wars change character. Ukraine did not need to destroy Moscow to change Moscow. It only needed to disrupt the rhythm of certainty. And disruption is contagious. Air defense commanders now face impossible choices: conserve expensive interceptors or risk letting drones through. Radar operators must distinguish between harmless noise and incoming threats in seconds. Civil aviation authorities must weigh safety against paralysis. Every decision carries political consequences. Even successful interceptions now come with a cost: public fear. Because explosions over residential districts, regardless of outcome, leave an imprint. People remember where they were when the windows shook. They remember the silence after the sirens stopped. They remember the moment they realized the state could not shield them from the sky. And once people begin remembering collectively, control becomes harder. This is the strategic brilliance of Ukraine's approach. Not escalation for spectacle, but pressure through exposure. By forcing Russia to defend everywhere at once, Ukraine stretches not only military hardware, but credibility. It also sends a message outward. To allies, adversaries, and undecided observers, December 10th demonstrated that Russia's vaunted defensive depth is neither seamless nor infinite. A system designed to deter NATO-level threats struggled against improvised distributed technology. That lesson will not be lost on other actors watching carefully. For decades, Moscow projected strength through symbols, parades, speeches, red lines. But modern warfare has a way of puncturing symbols with reality. Cheap tools can undermine expensive narratives. Small platforms can disrupt large systems. And once that realization spreads, deterrence weakens. The Kremlin will respond, of course. More defenses, more censorship, more insistence that everything is under control, perhaps even retaliatory messaging aimed at restoring fear abroad. But something fundamental has shifted. The Russian public has now seen the gap between promise and performance. between televised confidence and lived experience. And that gap is where doubt grows. History shows that regimes rarely fall because of a single event. They erode through accumulated moments when people quietly stop believing. December 10th was one of those moments. Not because Moscow burned, not because the state collapsed, but because millions of people looked up at their own sky and understood for the first time that it was no longer sealed. The war crossed an invisible boundary that night. And once a war comes home, even briefly, it never fully leaves again.